Hi everyone, this is Cami from One Woman's Trash is Another Woman's Treasure. Today I'm making my first video for the blog and we are going to be stripping stain and varnish from this 1952 Duncan Fife style drop leaf table. Now I would have just repaired the finish, but it was pretty cracked and chipped. The stain was wearing away in a lot of places and the veneer was actually chipped in a couple places as well as some water damage. So I wanted to be able to strip it down completely, restain it, and then re-varnish it. So we're going to do the stripping today. Let's get started. So these are the tools we're going to be using. I chose 3M Safest Stripper because I wanted to be able to work in the garage. It's been very cold and rainy and windy, and so I wanted to be able to work inside with the garage door closed, and I don't have a shop yet, so I wanted to get the safest stripper that was out there, and this one, based on my research, seems to be true to its name. And then we've got a sanding block, a putty knife, some stripping tools with the heavy-duty stripping pads and the final stripping pad, and then some paper towels for cleanup. Alright, so I've already done some of the panels for this table, and now I'm doing one of the leaves. And I've actually already attempted to strip this once. It was my first attempt. And you'll notice it doesn't really look stripped, and that's because I just didn't use enough of the stripper. So let's go ahead and put another coat of stripper on this. So I'm just going to use the Safest Stripper with a paintbrush like this. Now I'm not just going to sort of paint it on thin like I did the first time, because all that happens then is it dries on and you end up having to put more on, and it really doesn't get a chance to soak in. It really works best the more you can put on, and it says you need to put on at least 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to actually just kind of really slather this stuff on. So I'm just going to go around the whole piece doing this. Okay, so I've slathered it onto the entire thing now, and you can see just how thick that's on there. And we're going to need to let it sit for 30 to 60 minutes for varnish, which is what this is. But we don't want to let it sit too long because that can damage the veneer. So we're going to come back in 30 minutes and just check it, see if it's softened up enough. If not, we'll let it sit a little longer, and then we'll start stripping. Okay, so it's been about half an hour now, maybe just a little more. And we're going to check and see how well the varnish is softened up. So I'm just going to take my putty knife and start to just kind of scrape. Everything feels pretty soft. It's coming off pretty easily. So we're going to go ahead and strip this whole thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and scrape everything off, and then I can just literally take some paper towels and take all of this goop that's left and throw it into the regular garbage. So I'm going to scrape this, and I'm just going to be careful not to dig either corner of the putty knife in, and I'm also going to be careful around the edges because of the veneer, particularly this edge at the bottom where there's been a lot of water damage. And then along the edge here, I'm going to be really careful because of the water damage. And there's a chip right there in the veneer, so I need to see if you can see that. There's a chip right there in the veneer, so I'm going to be careful there as well. There's some kind of gummy, sticky spots when I go over that I can feel, and those are areas where we didn't quite penetrate all the way through the varnish. So we're probably going to end up needing to do a second application. As we get to the end here, got a lot of this goop to scrape off of here. So I'm just going to kind of scrape it into some paper towels so that I can get all the way to the edge without making a huge mess. just throw this right into the garbage. All right, so the next step is going to be to take one of these stripping tools with one of these heavy-duty stripping pads on it, and we're just going to scrub all the rest of this stuff and try to get some of these varnish spots off where we can still see varnish. And you can kind of tell just from the sheen of it where there is varnish left over. Now, even if we get to where it looks like we've got all of the varnish off with this first coat, I would still go over it a second time just to try to make sure not only that you've got all the varnish, but that you've got as much of the stain as you can. So there you go. You can kind of see, I don't know if you can tell in the light, there's not a whole lot of areas where we see the sheen from the varnish. Just a couple little spots that I'm going to kind of clean up. So now we're just going to take this final stripping pad, which is not as coarse as the heavy-duty stripping pad. I've just got a little bit of clean water in there, and we're just going to kind of clean it up and remove any last little bits that we can see. And you can see how much stain is actually coming up still. So that's why I was saying we probably are going to want to do a second coat, even if we do see, or even if we don't see any varnish left behind. We're still probably going to want to do a second coat just to get the rest of that stain up. All right, so let's put a second coat on. And I do have a couple of spots where there's varnish left behind, but rather than doing just spots, oops, I'm going to do the whole thing. So while I'm waiting for this to set in, I just wanted to show you this one. So this one is one where I thought I was pretty much done, but then there were a few spots of varnish left behind, and so I did just specific spots. And so you can see where it's actually pulled up the stain and then left stain behind everywhere else. So this one at some point I'll want to go back through and lay the stripper down one more time and go over it once more to get that all pulled up so that it's all clean and even and ready to be restained. Okay, it's been a little less than a half hour, but given that this is our second coat, that might be enough. Now it's probably a good idea to use gloves for this part because it does say to avoid repeated or prolonged exposure to your skin. So given that this is the part where we're taking all the scoop off, it probably would be wise to wear gloves. But of course I didn't think about it till after I'd already gotten started. And then we go back over it again with the heavy-duty stripping pads. Going with the grain and scrubbing any areas where I still see varnish. And then just once more with a wet final stripping pad, and then dry with paper towels. All right, so that's it. It looks a little dark right now because it's still wet, but when it dries out, it'll look more like the one to the right. And we'll be ready to do a light sanding and then restain this guy. Okay, so that's it. Now I'm by no means an expert. I'm just sharing what I've learned doing this myself. So if you have any additional tips, if you've tried other stripping products that you'd like to compare and contrast, please leave comments. We'd all appreciate them. And thanks for watching.